Everything works now. Even though the
Okay, cool.
audio might be a little bit low quality, but we go with that.
Okay, sounds
So
good.
yeah. So anyway, let's get this started.
Let's do it.
All right. So for those of you, so first of all, I want to introduce you really quick. Haseeb is one of my mentor through my job searching experience. So currently I'm doing this YouTube channel for a lot of people who are also trying to find jobs in tech. And I just feel like a lot of this experience that I had would be relevant for them. So in that case, you're pretty much the guru in this field. And one very important thing I think is relevant is that a lot of your tips are actually very practical. So I definitely want to invite you to share some of your experience with them. And then I think we told this, I sort of like expressed this before when we had lunch together. I really just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. All of the things you've been telling me, and then because I use them, they're very effective, and I got my job in the end. So thank you, Haseeb, for coming to agreeing with me on this YouTube session. It means a lot to me that you actually come. How to say? I'm so excited. I forgot to be on board.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you so much for inviting me, and obviously, congratulations on getting the job. I think you're probably giving me a little bit too much credit. I think most of that came from your own hard work, man. So I think you should be proud of what you've accomplished, and I'm glad that I was able to help you along that way.
Thank you so much. So yeah, let's get started. So please tell us a little bit about who you are and what do you do. Haseeb, I'm pretty sure a lot of people just can't wait to listen to this. So go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. So a little bit about myself. So the very shortest background I guess I can give on myself is that so I kind of came to tech from a very non-traditional background. I used to be a professional poker player. I played at the very highest levels of poker for about 5 years when I was younger. Then I got a degree from the University of Texas in English and philosophy. So again, completely non-technical. Eventually I decided that I wanted to get into the tech industry. And so I went to a coding bootcamp, which was App Academy. They ended up hiring me at the end of my tenure there, and I ended up becoming an instructor and then director of product. After that, I decided that I wanted to get a job in industry as a software developer, and I ended up applying to a bunch of different companies, had a very rough job search that ended up working out really well for me, and I decided among a number of different companies, ended up deciding to work at AirBnB, where I worked for from a little bit over a year, like a year and 2 or 3 months, as a software developer on the risk team, which is basically like the anti-fraud team. And so I did that for a little while, and I recently left in June, and now I'm working for a blockchain company here in San Francisco, and I've recently gotten really into the blockchain space. So right now I'm kind of exploring cryptocurrencies and a lot of these newer, really exciting technologies. But a lot of what I do is also write, I blog, I teach, I coach people, and I try to help people who are trying to get into the tech industry figure out their way around and hopefully not stumble in a lot of the ways that I have or that I've seen other people do. So that's me in a nutshell.
So even though like Haseeb is giving this, everything within maybe 1 minute, 2 minutes, but that's a lot of things, combined. So I'll try to ask you many questions to sort of dig out a little bit deeper into some of the level. For example, sure. One of the things that I've always been curious about I would say courage, right? Because from your blog, I read a lot of things about you. Mentioned that you basically donated all of the money you made from your poker career, and you just sort of like, okay, I'm just going to San Francisco and do this bootcamp thing. So what is the drive behind all of that? Please tell us a little bit about like how did you find so much courage? And the reason I asked that question is because I find not many people had that sort of like mentality in them. So yeah, please share that with us.
Sure. Yeah. So you're right. When soon after I retired from poker around 2011, and I was 21 when I quit, and I was very successful as a poker player. I made a lot of money. I got to the very highest levels of the game, and I think I was 19 when I first became a millionaire. And I think making a lot of money when you're young you learn a lot of lessons that normally takes many people a lifetime to actually really internalize. And I think at a very young age, I realized that money wasn't going to make me happy. I'm not a particularly materialistic person, but I do care a lot about mastering things. I care a lot about growing, and I care a lot about helping people and doing something that really matters. And so it was a few years after I quit poker that I kind of realized that the money that I made as a poker player wasn't really coming to much useful use in being like a nest egg for me, or being a cushion for me to take care of myself and be comfortable and be safe and secure. And I realized that it was better for the world, and it was also better for me if I gave that money away. And that kind of started a path and started a trajectory for me, where I eventually started learning about this movement called effective altruism. And that's kind of what started to guide a lot of my life. The idea of effective altruism is the idea of essentially being very rigorous and scientific about the way you try to help the world. And I became convinced that the best way for me to help the world, like kind of the best pound for pound way for me to influence the world the most with my life, would be to go and take a high income, high earning career in a lucrative field like software engineering, and then donate as much money as I could to charity, to high impact charity. And so that's what I did. So I decided, based on that idea, that I was going to go and try to get a job in the software industry. And that was the impetus for me to come out, move to San Francisco, go to App Academy, do all these things, because I thought that is the best way for me to get that done. And so when I first started working at App Academy, that was like June or July 2017. From then on, I started donating a third of my income to charity, my pre-tax income. And so hopefully as I make more, I intend to donate even more. But living in San Francisco and also trying to save up money so that I have some level of security and that I can take more risks, like you said, it's hard to donate much more than 33% while still living in the city. But overall, my goal is to do as much good as possible in the world, and at the same time to become as effective as possible in my role as a technologist, my role as somebody who's trying to move the world forward through technology, which is, I think, Silicon Valley is the best place in the world to do that, and that's what brought me here.
That's a lot of things to take in, but I definitely, well, I think, having something in mind that you want to like go through that route, and it really motivates you the whole way while you are with App Academy for a very long time, not very long time, I'd say a couple months. A lot of people are curious, how did you do it? What's the secret sauce of you basically learning software engineering in such a short amount of time? Because to a lot of people, that software engineering, it's very hard at its core. People will think, oh, this is has to be for smart people, especially when they're hearing you, oh wow, you're from Google, you're from Airbnb, you're from all this crazy company. It must be like super incredible. So can you share us a little bit about your journey of this? It doesn't have to be very specific, but I want people to hear like the overall big story of how you made it transition into tech.
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think it's a tricky question as to how, like, what is the secret sauce? Like, what is it that I do, or that I do differently than other people, that has made me able to learn this skill set fairly quickly? And I'd say that I give a few different answers to that. So one is that I think it's obviously true that to some degree, like, learning how to program and learning how to do anything sufficiently technical requires an analytical mind. Like, if you're somebody who doesn't think analytically, or can't even contort your brain to think that way, then it's going to be much more challenging for you than for somebody else who naturally thinks analytically. And that doesn't mean that you know a lot of math, or that you do a lot of, logic or computation or stuff like that. Like, I hadn't done any like math in like 10 years from the time that I started programming. But that being said, I'm still somebody, I think, even when I was programming, who knew how to think very analytically and thought very logically. And I think that's something that is a pretty good predictor of who ends up being able to learn this stuff quickly. But then there's also the matter of how good are you at learning itself. And that's something that I think in my time as a poker player, I learned how to learn. I learned how to teach myself things. And most people don't actually ever need to learn how to teach themselves things. And so they don't become very good at it. Going through normal school, or going through university, or primary or secondary education, for the most part, what you learn is how to pass tests, and you learn how to do homework, you learn how to pass bars, you learn how to avoid getting called out. You don't learn how to bootstrap your own knowledge. You learn how to get as much knowledge as you need to get by to get to the next test, or get to the next grade, or get to the next school. And I learned how to do that when I was younger, because that's what I think everybody gets trained to do that from the education system, especially as you go into more and more realms of higher learning. But in the poker world, which is where I was for so many years of my life, in the poker world, there are no tests. Nobody checks in on you. No one cares if you know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, you just lose all your money and you don't get to play anymore. You know, like there's no shepherding you from stage to stage or holding your hand and making sure you pass the quiz, that you know how to play pocket jacks, or you know how to calculate your pot odds. If you don't know how to do that stuff, you're just going to lose. And so it's this enormous open arena where the only thing that you get to learn is what you teach yourself. And so I think being a poker player really taught me how to be rigorous about teaching myself things, and also a lot of the principles of learning and psychology that I think are, again, a lot of people don't really spend a lot of time thinking about and learning. And so just, even very simple stuff like fast iteration cycles, making sure you're getting continual feedback, making sure that you're practicing a thing in many different modalities rather than just one, because you're going to learn it faster that way. Knowing when to cut your losses on something you're not learning, and knowing when to say, okay, this stuff is more important, so I'm going to spend more time learning this thing, right? These kinds of things that, again, when you're in normal education, you're not worrying about these things as a student. Your teacher is worrying about them. They're worrying about how to build the curriculum, how to do the pedagogy, how often to give you homework problems, how many homework problems and of what type to give you, right? And then as a student, you just grind on whatever they give you. But if you're going through trying to teach yourself something new, then you are the student and the teacher. You've got to design your own curriculum, and then you've got to actually do it. Doing the curriculum is a matter of patience. It's a matter of emotional strength. It's a matter of just getting the work done and just showing up and grinding. But then there's the part of teaching yourself. And that's the part that, I think requires some knowledge of psychology, knowledge of how to learn something, knowledge of, also what your own capacities are. What is your own tolerance level? How long can you work on this thing without going crazy? And once you know all that stuff, then I think you can learn almost anything much faster than you would otherwise imagine you'd be able to.
Yeah, so add on to that. So for those of you who is watching this video, if you guys just go to the I haven't figured out the YouTube terminology, the section down below. I'm gonna link a link to Haseeb blog in actually because he described basically whatever he just talked about in detail of specifically what to do each steps to find a job in tech. So to reference some of the things that Haseeb will tell us in in this video, that's the starting point. So that's very very I just feel like you are always kind of into your way of learning software engineering, because in your blog you have very specific detail on each section, which is when I trying to come up with all these things, it was eye-opening, because a lot of these viewers in this channel will be primarily Chinese students, international Chinese students. For them, learning is more like a the teacher just like you just said, the teacher will give you problems and you just solve them, and then all that kind of things. I want to ask you something very technical in terms of preparing yourself to do all these technical problems, right? Because a lot of people, they don't know how to structure, how do I say, they don't know how to structure enough so that they not only learn the algorithm by itself, but also understand the underlying difficulties, like what people really wanted to know from these things. Because they just say, okay, we need to know dynamic programming, we need to know DFS, BFS, but they don't actually know how to actually learn it deeply without just going through question meaninglessly. So can you tell us a little bit of how you actually learn all these things and your methodology behind it?
Sure. So that's a fairly large question, but I'll try my best to give a good answer to it. Yes. So let's say, for example, that you're a student and you're trying to understand how to solve graph problems. Okay. So the first thing I'd say is that a bad way to go about trying to solve graph problems would be to say, okay, I'm going to find a bunch of questions that are to which the answer is BFS. Then I'm going to do all those. Then I'm going to find a bunch of questions to whom the answer is DFS, and I'll solve all those. Then I'll find a bunch of ones where the answer is Dijkstra's, and I'll solve all those. Right? That's not a very good way to learn graph theory or to learn graph traversals. And the reason why is that what you've done in the way that you've structured your learning is that you've separated them into these three categories, right? And when you started the first category, you knew what the answer essentially was. It was just some transformation of BFS. The second one, you knew what the answer was. It was some transformation of BFS, and so on. And really, a large part of the work in solving an algorithms problem is actually figuring out what the underlying algorithm should be, right? And so really the optimal way to do that is to continually try to figure out the problem of, can I solve this with a BFS or a DFS or with Dijkstra's or with some other graph algorithm, right? And so when you just start kind of thinking, I mean, I don't know that there's a kind of general formula that I'd be comfortable just ad-libbing, but I would say that when you start thinking about what are you actually training yourself to do, you know, it's not enough to just have checked off a bunch of problems. The question is, what was the actual thing your brain was practicing? What were the things that you were actually going through again and again and again, and getting feedback on whether you were doing it the right way or the wrong way? So the first thing is that it's okay to be working on this particular category of problems at the same time, but you certainly don't want to only be working on one, what you might say, like one transformation of the same solution over and over and over again, because then you're just going to be, you're going to know how to solve a problem if you know it's a BFS problem. But if you don't know if it's a graph algorithm, or if you don't know what kind of graph algorithm it would be, or whether you should even represent it as a graph, that's honestly one of the hardest parts of any interview question, is figuring out, how do I represent this? Should I represent this as a graph, as a linked list, as a this, as a that? And then, what algorithm can I use on that data structure to solve this problem? If the way you're studying how to do that is you're literally starting from knowing essentially what the transformation is going to be, and then you just code it up, well, that's trivial. All you're doing is coding up the same thing over and over again, but you're not doing the hard part of actually figuring out the algorithm. So that would be one thing, one common mistake I think a lot of people make. The second mistake that I think a lot of people make is they tend to spend way too long struggling. And that's one of the things about, especially about software engineering and algorithms problems, is that, you know, it's not like doing programming is not like exercising, in the sense that, you know, if you're like trying to run a marathon, okay, and you run as hard as you can, and you can only get 2/3 of the way there, but then you like keep going and you keep just like slogging it out until you get to the end, whatever, screw it, right? Because at least getting to the end will just make you better. And so you should still slog it out and just do the crappy part at the end. Software engineering is not like that, because that crappy part at the end where you're like sitting there stuck for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, and you're not getting it, and you're just going in circles, you're not getting any stronger. You're not getting any faster. You're not building up your muscles. You're just wasting time. And so generally one of the pieces of advice I give very often on my blog is that you should actually give up pretty quickly. And basically what that means is that roughly around 20 to 30 minutes of not making progress on a problem, go look up the answer. And then once you've looked up the answer, great, you know the answer now. Make sure you understand the answer, and then, you know, close the answer, and then try to re-implement it from memory. Try to re-implement whatever you understood from the answer. And if you don't get it, then be like, okay, cool, delete everything you just wrote, go back, look at the answer again, make sure you understand it this time, then go back, close the answer, try to implement it again, keep doing this over and over and over again until you actually get the answer down. Okay? Again, you want relatively fast iteration cycles, fast feedback. And then once you actually have that answer down, great, awesome, you solved the problem. You know, go on to the next problem, but keep that problem in your rotation. Come back to it. You haven't mastered it yet, right? Like, you want to keep coming back to these things and sort of reintroducing them into your cycle of problems that you're dealing with. And if you just do this over and over again, the rate of exposure where your brain is actually doing the hard part, and the hard part is figuring out the algorithm and then coding it up. Those are the two hard parts. There's no special third hard part that's struggling on a problem for a really long time and eventually getting there. You know, chances are if you're struggling on a problem, in a real interview, you're probably just not going to get it. And that's okay. You want to optimize for the problems you are going to get. And for those problems, you want to get there faster, and you want to get there with a larger subset of all possible problems. And the best way to do that is to basically think about training in high velocity and repeatedly testing yourself until you gain mastery over that particular problem. So those two things, or those two approaches, I think, go a long way towards optimizing your study of problems.
Wow, I want to add a little bit from what you just said from my personal experience. I think a lot of these are incredibly important, because I also made a mistake of, you know, so okay, I'm just going through all of the linked list problem. But the thing is, behind that mentality, it's very hard for you to actually find a new pattern with problem. If the interviewers say one day they just discover a new data structure and they want to ask you to see if you can figure it out, because that was not in my my database in my mind. I just can't solve that kind of problem. So that is such a common mistake for people. So please take notes, my viewer. This is very important. Yes, and then so away a little bit from the technical side, I want to also ask you a little bit of your mindset. So a lot of the Chinese students, I have a little chatting group, right? They're also asking, oh, when can we start applying? When to do this? When to do that? I feel like deep inside into our culture that a lot of us are perfectionists, right? We don't want to messed up, say, oh, this is Google interview. We don't want to, just toss my resume there. So we messed up in the end. But from your blog, you sort of discussed that when you first applied for a different coding bootcamp, right? You don't want to wait for 2 months to join one of the bootcamp because you think, okay, I just need to join any bootcamp and get good at it. So you are very good at taking actions, right? You don't wait for things. Tell us a little bit about your mentality into that part, and then how why you are not just waiting to how to phrase it. So so you are not waiting too much on things. Yes.
Sure. So I add a caveat to what you just said, is that there are times when I do wait. There are times when I am more patient than others. There are times when, I guess the distinction that I'd make is that, you're right, a lot of people tend to be perfectionists in that they don't want to take risks until they feel like they can de-risk themselves as much as possible. And one way to do that is to keep working on stuff, keep getting better, never apply until you're absolutely certain that everything's perfect. And the reality is that everything is not going to be perfect, ever. Like, you're never going to get to a point where you're like, yes, I'm definitely ready to smash my Google interview now. Everything's great. Now, that said, there is some point at which it's like, okay, I don't even have my resume ready. My resume looks like crap. I don't have enough projects. Like, I haven't even started studying, where it probably does make sense for you to wait. And there are times, absolutely, when I waited before I was ready to apply because I knew that I had some stuff to do before I started applying. But also, there are times when, the ordering of companies in which you want to apply to is also very strategic, right? So in the way that most people apply, and the way that I applied to jobs as well, is that I didn't apply to the company that I was most excited about until later in the process. But I started applying quickly, right? Just to companies that weren't like sort of my A-list companies. Now, I think the big mistake that a lot of people make, so they make a lot of mistakes along those lines, but I think the biggest mistake that people make is they tend to be perfectionists when the difference between two different options doesn't matter very much. And time matters way more. And that was actually the situation that I was in when I was applying to coding bootcamps, was that I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that, like, time was the most important thing. So when you're deciding that you want to go and learn how to code, right? You have to, like, the decision that I was making at the time. So I was deciding between a couple of boot camps, and one of the boot camps, actually Hack Reactor, I was very interested in at the time. But Hack Reactor, their start date was, I think, 2 months past what the App Academy start date was. And so what that meant was that if I could do Hack Reactor, then maybe Hack Reactor was a better school at the time. I don't know that it is anymore, but at the time it was quite strong. And so I kind of thought to myself, like, okay, Hack Reactor may be a better school than App Academy, but I'd have to wait 2 extra months. And the cost of that time is actually enormously high, where the difference in value between App Academy and Hack Reactor was very small. It was almost nothing. And so to me, it was just basically a no-brainer that even though Hack Reactor would have been a better school, if I just got through App Academy and finished, and then had those 2 months to just like study and improve and whatever, at the end of that time, by the time I would have graduated from Hack Reactor, I would be much, much further along in a much stronger position. And so I think this is, again, one of those mistakes a lot of people make, is that they don't think about the value of time. And time is really one of the most important assets that you have. And so when you think about, when you start applying to companies, you should start applying sooner, because it's going to force you to start your process sooner and finish your process sooner. It's going to basically tie your hand in making your process go faster. And that in and of itself is really, really valuable, because, again, it buys you more time.
Yeah, I like that mentality, because a lot of people are waiting for the window to open up. And I also want to add one thing. It is to a personal level that when I first got here around February, at the end of February, that's when all of the job application pretty much ends for new grads. So for this like huge window from around March until about recently, That's when people are start hiring for new grads anymore. So I just want to add on that, if you are applying for a job for maybe next year, don't wait too much on. Don't wait like about 3 months, and then after that, the job window is cut off, and then that's pretty much going to screw you over for a very long time. At least that's a little bit from my personal taste. And also, so adding on that, so when you are going through this bootcamp experience, do you have any doubt in yourself? That's one thing I also want to ask you, because you are very good at dealing with doubts. Because sometimes I remember in one of the interviews you were saying that people are doubting you about, oh, you're just from a bootcamp. You're not actually a software engineer. What is your react to some of those doubts, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think self-doubt is universal.
Yes.
I mean, everybody feels that, and I'm no exception to that. So I think if I remember when I was going through App Academy, I mean, I had doubts all the time, because I was in this program with all these people who had been coding for a long time, some people who had studied computer science in school, some people who even work professionally as engineers, and I thought, like, how am I going to be able to ever catch up with these people? And then, I do okay in my boot camp. And then, of course, the very next thing I think is, okay, now I'm going to go into industry. How am I going to catch up with these people? And then, the train never ends of feeling doubts and feeling uncertainty about yourself. I think as to how to get over that, I think the first thing is to realize that it's totally normal to doubt yourself, and to not pathologize yourself or feel like something's wrong with you because you doubt yourself. Realize that it's totally normal. It's part of the process, and it's going to go away. It's just a matter of time. It's a matter of you being there long enough and getting enough experience under your belt that essentially that doubt is just going to resolve itself. It's just going to kind of go away by itself. So that's one thing, is if you just know that it's normal, it's part of the process, that kind of lessens the severity or the fear that you're going to feel about feeling self-doubt. And also allow yourself to feel it. You don't need to judge yourself or punish yourself for feeling that doubt. It's okay to feel doubt. And just, again, know that it's going to go away, know that it's temporary, and know that it's a normal part of any kind of life transition. The second thing is to also realize, and this is maybe somewhat of an aggressive strategy, but realize how many incompetent people there are. Like, how many people who are not even trying? Like, how many people who are not even putting in half the work that you're putting in? So like anytime that I feel a lot of self-doubt, I feel like, man, I don't know enough about this, I don't know enough about that. I just started working at a new company, I don't know the code base, I don't know the language, I don't know the framework that they're using, right? And I feel like, man, am I really pulling my weight? Am I really good enough? And the first thing that I have to remind myself is that there are so many people who are, I may not be an expert on this stuff. Absolutely, I'm totally right to doubt myself in that respect. But I'm going to get there because I'm working my ass off. And there's so many people who don't. And I'm just going to pass them. I'm just running faster than they are. I'm showing up more often to the track. And even if I doubt myself now, again, like, I just trust in the process that I'm going through. I trust in the learning. I trust in the hard work. I trust in the discipline that I'm going to get there even if I'm not there right now. And that, I think, is a very important antidote that, no matter how far behind you are, I think there's almost no domain where enough hard work isn't going to catch you up.
And this is especially true in software engineering, since that a lot of things that we do, as long as you put a lot of efforts into learning, there's it's not like you have to be super smart at just doing software engineering, because there's tons of resources online where you can learn all these things. I just feel like a lot of people who are in school are always doubting about their abilities of actually getting to some of these like big names, right? They think it's just some sort of hierarchy that is too high into their ability. So yeah, I just feel like if they're just internalize that they're actually working hard enough, that you can definitely this is nothing too much out of everyone's ability. In my personal taste. So yeah. Also, now we're going to jump into something that I personally learned too much from you. It's your way of networking. Before we get into this part, right? I want to basically tell you, currently what I figure out into my viewer-based strategy. A lot of people would, there's a website called 1.3. I don't know how to say that word, but it's Ox. But there's a forum that is especially popular in Chinese group, that people will just go up there and say, oh, can you guys refer me for this company or that company? I rarely see anybody because I was in that phone for a long time until this one day I just randomly search online and I find you, and I saw all this crazy, like not really crazy, but for me at the time it's eye opening. Like, wow, this guy is just going to talk to these people and do all these crazy things, and and you really opened my eyes. So I want you to sort of like talk about your networking experience with my viewer to sort of like say, okay, maybe there's another way. Not only you just go random people and ask for referral. There could be another way to this result. So yeah, please tell us a little bit about your networking strategy.
Yeah, so I think most people when they think of networking, they think of exactly what you described, which is find random people, ask them to refer you, grab a business card or something like that, and that form of networking is very, very crappy. It almost never works. And like, if it works because you're already impressive on paper and it wasn't going to be hard for you anyway to find a job. So I think the approach that I take, and I think the approach that a lot of the research and the best people I think who are natural networkers do, is instead of reaching out to people to try to get a job from them, like instead what you should do is you should reach out to people, and the last thing that you should do is try to get a job from them. What you should do instead is to do what's called informational interviewing. And the whole idea of informational interviewing, it's very simple. All you do is you go meet somebody, you say, hey, can I buy you coffee? You invite them out, you go to get coffee with them, and you tell them, hey, I want to learn as much as possible about what you do. I want to learn about your industry. I want to learn about the technology you work with. I want to learn about your company. And all you want to do is learn. You're not asking them for anything. You're not getting anything from them. You're just learning. And the most awesome thing about this, and the thing is, like when you're learning and you're asking a lot of questions, you're not talking about yourself. You're talking about them. You're learning about them. You're getting value from what you are gaining from learning about them and asking them questions about their industry. And you can even ask them questions along the lines of, if you were in my situation, what would you do? What technologies would you focus on? What would you be learning? How would you be spending your time? What meetups would you be going to? Stuff like that. Getting advice from people and getting their knowledge rather than trying to ask them for something, like some material good, or asking them to vouch for you or refer you. Nobody wants to refer you. But people do want to talk about their lives and themselves and what they know a lot about and what their expertise is. People love talking about that stuff. And so if you can tap into what people actually want to talk about, which is themselves, and you can basically demonstrate your curiosity and your willingness to learn and your willingness to be studious, people are going to respect that. They're going to appreciate that. And in all likelihood, that is actually the best way to end up getting a referral. Counterintuitively, if you go and ask for a referral, you're very unlikely to get one.
Yes,
but if you don't ask for a referral, that actually significantly increases your chance that this person is going to think, wow, this person is working really hard. This person I really respect. They didn't come out and ask me for a referral when I don't know this person. I have no reason to refer them. I like this person. I respect this person. Even if they don't give you a referral, totally cool, you can still learn a lot from them. And actually, that should be your goal in general, is to learn. The goal is not to go and collect a bunch of referrals, because if you can't get referrals, then it most likely means that you're not ready, you're not good enough, you don't know enough, you don't have enough experience. And so if you're not at that place yet, awesome. Basically, you can use this technique to go and find mentors. Find people who are going to push you in the right direction, who are going to teach you a lot, who are going to put you in touch with companies. And then eventually, when you are ready, when you are at that skill level, if you continually meet up with these people, you talk to them, you let them know how things are going, you keep them abreast of everything that's going on in your life, then eventually when you are ready, they're going to be the people who are your champions. They're going to be the people who believe in you, who've seen you go through this process, and who are going to say, yeah, I saw you do all this stuff. I think he's awesome. I'm going to refer you to my company. And this is a much more scalable and effective process than just going to random meetups or mailing random people and asking them to refer you. I get a lot of people messaging me to ask me to refer them, and I basically never do it because I don't know any of these people. I have no reason to refer them. Even if I tried to refer them, it wouldn't be any use because I wouldn't be able to say anything about them to any company that I talk them to. So that, I think, is the biggest mistake a lot of people make with networking, and I think it's surprisingly easy to fix. And I think it's kind of the only way that someone like me, who had no background in technology, like no technical anything on my resume, the only way somebody like me was able to get people to vouch for me was by doing exactly this.
Yeah, and I think generally speaking that a lot of people who are like you are working at Airbnb before, they get a lot of, for example, if you guys use LinkedIn, they get a lot of message. And if someone just popped up and tell you that, can you refer me? I think that at some level is some sort of insult, because it just feels that you literally using me as a tool to get into your next stage in life. I personally think that, yeah, that is definitely the wrong way of approaching people. Because right now, after I get into synopsis and people are just starting me, hey, can you refer me? I don't even know this person. So, from your perspective, I think that's definitely true. And one thing I want to add on, this is like, I've been telling people about how crazy, like, about your coffee things, right? It works so well. And I basically say, not only, because I literally using your strategy on a daily basis, I basically train myself to de-argue with the problem to a point that I feel like, okay, I'm ready. I need to go network with people. Not only people are willing to meet with you and then talk about themselves, they also will invite you to say, okay, we are working at Google, we're working at Facebook. We don't need you to buy us coffee. Why don't you just come over to our campus and have free food? I was like, oh my God, free food. So, because I was really desperate, financially at a point. So I just feel like as long as people are generous enough, right, you want to know about them, they will also treat you very nicely as a return. And by the way, that's how so after watching that, I was messaging you basically with the same template that you had on your website. I feel like, whoa, Haseeb, think about this, because I'm basically using whatever he just taught us on him. So I don't know, like, I just feel that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
And so a lot of things. Also, I want to add on is, since a lot of these viewers will be international students, some of them might say, oh, what if we don't really speak well English, right? Would that be a problem for them to go out and negotiate with people? What is your take on that? What if you are someone that who probably don't speak a lot of English? Do you think this strategy will also be applicable for them?
In short, yes. I don't think so. I think if you don't speak very good English, the first thing I'd say is you should probably try to find people who speak your native language as well. I mean, like, especially if you're working in Silicon Valley, there are a lot of Chinese people, a lot of Korean people, Japanese people, Indian people, like a lot of people from, not all, but many different languages. And if you feel more comfortable speaking in another language, the easiest thing to do is, like, there's no shortage of engineers who you can reach out to who probably do speak your native language, and like they even list it on LinkedIn. So like you can go and figure this out for yourself and go and do that. When you're actually in the process of getting a job, so two things I would say. One is that it probably does benefit you to improve your English, because just not networking aside, but just like a lot of other things that it takes to be an engineer, communication is really important. And if you're working in the States, then you're going to be communicating in English. So I think it probably does. It is significantly to your benefit to work on your English skills. But even if your English skills are weak, I don't think that prevents you from negotiating or networking or anything like that. Even if you can only interact with somebody who's a native English speaker. I think, one, if you know enough English to get by, that's probably enough. But also, if you're not comfortable speaking in person when it comes to negotiating, particularly, so networking you have to do in person. Like, there's no way around that. But when it comes to doing things over, when it comes to negotiating a job offer, you can absolutely do that over email. And if you feel more comfortable, you can like get somebody to proofread your English. Then that totally works. And you can just be very blunt with somebody that it's easier for me to communicate over email because my English is not very good. And pretty much everybody is going to buy that. Everyone will understand. Okay, yes, I can see that. That's totally fine with me.
Okay, that's very valid advice. Okay, so the very last thing I want to touch when we talk about job finding, right, is I'm in this chatting group, like I said earlier, people getting rejected so many times, right? And I'm pretty sure while you were finding jobs, you also got rejected so many times. And I watched another video from this guy named Sean. It's just that he had this joke about people will congratulate you after you become something, right? And then, but they don't know like all of these things like behind getting rejected and all that. People just say, "Oh, you're from Google, you must be smart," or something like that. So, tell us a little bit about like after you get rejected so many times, like what is the feeling of that, and then how do you bounce out from that feeling, and then make sure that you're healthy enough for your next, to keep going in this path.
Yeah. There are two big things I think when it comes to rejection and failure, really, because that's what it's going to seem like. It's going to seem like failure. So one thing, or actually, I'll say three things. Three things about failure. The first one is that you have to realize that no matter what you feel, or no matter how hard it feels at the time, or no matter how painful it is at any given time, your failure, the feeling that you feel of being, like, there's no way to not feel shitty when bad stuff happens. There's no way to not feel like, I'm a failure, I wasn't good enough, I wasn't smart enough, I didn't work hard enough. You're always going to feel that. There's nobody who's exempt from that feeling. The difference is that some people know, even at the time that they feel that this feeling is going to go away. If I wake up tomorrow, I'll feel a bit better, and the day after tomorrow, I won't even remember this, right? That realization, I think, is really, really important, is to realize that the negative feelings that you have when you do fail are transient. They're going to go away. So even if you feel that at the time, like, oh man, I suck, I didn't do good enough, I didn't work hard enough, I feel crappy now, but tomorrow I'll feel better, and tomorrow I'm going to go back and hit the books again. For tonight, I'm going to mope, I'm going to feel bad, I'm going to eat ice cream, whatever you got to do, but always remember that tomorrow you're going to feel better. Like, your brain just isn't going to sit in that funk forever. It's going to go away, it's going to dull with time, and you're going to go back to where you were. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to realize that, what do I want to say? So there's this mindset that I've had for a very long time, since I was a poker player, and that I try to encourage a lot of my students to have. And that mindset is one of, when you think about the number of trials you're going to have to do, so like that's like, the number of interviews or the number of on-sites or the number of X or Y or Z, it always seems like you never get it until you have it, right? It's like fail, 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 and then finally you win. And kind of what that seems like at the time is a bunch of very low probability gambles, right? So it's kind of like you're repeatedly doing a gamble with 100-sided dice, and you only get, you got to roll a perfect 100, otherwise you lose, right? And if that was really what was happening, then it would just feel constantly like this futile effort. It's like you got to roll 100, you get 60. Oh, no. Then you roll 42, no. And then you roll 7, no. And you just do this over and over again. It's very demoralizing because you feel like you're never going to roll the 100, right? But the real way to think about it, and I think the much better way to think about it as a human being, is to know, I don't know how many rolls it's going to take me to hit the 100. But eventually, there's some number of rolls that I'm going to have to hit until I hit my first 100. I don't know that number. It might be 20 rolls. It might be 5 rolls. It might be 140 rolls. I don't know how many it's going to take to hit all, right? But somewhere fixed in the universe, there is that number. And if I roll, every time I do one roll, I am decrementing the number of rolls I have left until I hit my 100. And I don't know what that number is, but I do know every time I roll that it's going down by 1, right? And that, I think, is the only way you can really think about this stuff. And so, I guess the final thing that I encourage you to think about failure is that failure really, if you think about it that way, failure is just practice. Because every time you fail at anything that's a skill, you're actually getting better. Like, every time you do an onsite, it feels like you failed and you didn't get anywhere. But really, like, okay, they gave me this linked list problem. I'm never going to mess up that problem ever again. And now I'm a little bit less nervous when I get in front of a board because I've just done this like 5 times now. Now is the 6th time, I've cracked the same joke about my resume, and so now I can just crack that joke all the time. It's not weird anymore. Or I know how to explain that project, or I know a better way to, like, talk about my experience here. Or I know, if somebody asks me about the time complexity of this thing, I'm never going to get it wrong again because I got it wrong in that 3rd interview, and that's never going to happen again. And so you just do enough of these interviews, and they're all practice. If you just look at every single thing you do as practice, and you just know that, like, you're getting better. Actually, that probability, it seems like you're rolling a 100-sided die, but really, actually, you're rolling a smaller and smaller die every single time. So the first time it's a 100-sided die, then it's a 90-sided die, then it's a 30-sided die, and a 20-sided die. And pretty sure you just got to get 1 out of 6 in order to win this interview, right? And when you realize that's going on, then it suddenly becomes a lot more invigorating, and you gain a lot more confidence in the process of interviewing. They're like, hey, yeah, I could do 10 interviews and fail, but I'll be 10 interviews better by the time I do my 11th interview. And that's going to make me a lot stronger and much more likely to succeed. And that's exactly what you see.
That is incredible. Yeah, I definitely agree with you on the mindset shifting, right? Instead of seeing as a failure, but you actually gain through each interview, which is really true from a personal perspective. Because I've been failing way too much from each internship, interview, on-site interviews. Some places they will not, like, just by on the resume stage, I'll get rejected like tons of times, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but then later on, after that feeling of oh, I did so well in this interview. What went wrong? Like this one time, I remember I went to San Francisco. I aced my on-site interview. I think I did so great. I was like helping them with their company structure, pretty much similar to your experience with 23andMe, I believe, or Udacity. That experience. And then right when I got home and I just saw the rejection letter, I'm like, oh my god! Those times I literally saved your blog onto my Chrome as some sort of like nerve release. I said, oh my god, I need to look at some Haseeb blog to feel better. But rejection is real until like finally I got a job at Synopsys. That's when everything sort of just okay. That's kind of what they if we look back. So thank you on your feedback on that. All right, so I think that's enough to sort of wrap that out of the job searching part. Right now is I want to do something just about you in your future. I want to know your perspective of. So a lot of people have been saying, oh, Haseeb, like you recently just left Airbnb. So they're wondering, what's going on with Haseeb? What's your next stage that they can't wait to hear more about you? So so can you tell us a little bit why you quit Airbnb and what is this blockchain thing you've keep telling us about?
Yeah, well, so Airbnb was, Airbnb is a fantastic company. It's, I learned an enormous amount. I really loved the people there. I loved the work. It was, I think I realized after working there for a little while is that I knew when I first came out of Silicon Valley that my goal was at some point to become an entrepreneur. I knew that at some point starting a company was going to be in my path. And I think I realized that at the stage Airbnb is growing super, super fast. So I think at the time that I joined, they had 300-something engineers. And by the time I left, they had 800-something engineers. So they grew tremendously in the time that I was there. And I think I kind of realized that having come to Airbnb at a time where it was scaling and growing very quickly, of course, it's great for any company to be scaling at that speed. But Airbnb was also a company that had, for better or for worse, it had made it. Airbnb was a very successful company. And it was also a quite big company and getting to the place of being a very big company. And I think I realized that wasn't exactly the skill set and the stage of company that I wanted to be gaining my skills and learning the most. So I mean, it was an awesome place to like build your career if that's the end goal that you want, is to like have a lot of responsibility and power at a fast growing and really impressive company. Which Airbnb, like I have nothing but positive things to say about it. But I think I realized that it wasn't what was most relevant to me at the stage that I'm at in my career of, I guess, like I said, being high risk, high reward, like taking a very, very big risk. And I think Airbnb is at the stage where Airbnb is a very safe bet. It's a very solid company with really, really good financials, really good engineering, really good people, and a really strong brand. So I decided I wanted to do something kind of higher risk and earlier stage. And so I left Airbnb, left on good terms, and I think everybody was really friendly and happy to see me moving on. And so I started getting really into the blockchain space. And I've been interested in blockchain for a while, and now blockchain has really started to take off in the last 6 months, and it's getting really crazy. A lot of people who'd never even heard of Bitcoin or Ethereum or blockchains are now, it's kind of titillating a lot of their inner ear when it comes to the crazy money that's getting thrown around and a lot of the new technological innovations that are happening almost every day. And so all of this stuff has just been really exciting for me. I think blockchains are a groundbreaking technology, and not just the technology itself, because technology is one thing, but I think the adoption and the way that people are using these things and the way that people are building totally decentralized systems that span the world, that no single person controls, no government, no institution, no bank, no company, but that entire network that's just self-composed that can instantiate money, or that can instantiate something completely different than money. That to me is totally fascinating. It's a totally new thing that we've never really seen before in the world. And I decided that I thought this was going to be huge. I thought this was going to totally change the world, and that I wanted to be a part of it. And that's kind of what's brought me to start really delving deep into blockchain technology in the last few months, and now start working on the blockchain.
I see. So, these also, like, I love how your way of thinking that, because a lot of people would be very happy to stay with Airbnb for a long time, or any big growing company, because you sort of like taking a risk into this new technology. What makes you really believe in this innovation? When do you? So this is a very kind of intuitive, not unintuitive question. How to say? Because how do you define an opportunity? What do you think an opportunity is an opportunity? Because for a lot of people, they don't know how to make their next jump into career, and then they don't see like the future trend. So in your perspective, you see blockchain is going to be like something like a huge thing, right? What makes you to think that way?
Sure. So, I mean, first thing is that I could totally be wrong. I think if you're aiming at what is hot right now, then that's okay. So let me kind of start over in how I answer this question. So there are a few things that are very, very safe bets to work on. One of them is web development. The web is going to be around for a really, really long time. So if you want to learn web development or web programming, you're going to have a job for a long time. There are other things that are similar, that are like, machine learning is going to be around for a very long time. Very safe bet to learn machine learning. Data science, Excel, a lot of things that are just kind of like, yes, this stuff is important and it's going to exist for a long time. So learn it, you'll be fine. Then there are things that are more speculative. And so a lot of these things are like current, very hot technologies that are still up and coming. So a good example is VR, virtual reality. That's sort of a very up and coming thing. There are, I can't think of a lot of other great examples. I mean, there's like, I don't want to get into that. But there are other technologies that are more speculative and kind of earlier on in their life cycle that haven't really been totally productionized yet, or aren't really clear how they're going to shake out. VR is a very good example of that. Augmented reality is another good example of that, which is sort of one step below VR. I think blockchain is also in this category, where it's kind of hot right now, but it's also very uncertain where it's going to be 3 years from now. So kind of like VR has been in many different times in the past, there were a lot of times when VR was very, very hyped up, where a lot of people were super excited about it, and then it didn't really deliver. There weren't any big VR companies back in the mid 2000s, early 2000s, where a lot of people were investing a lot of money thinking that there were going to be, and a lot of people think that the same thing might be going on right now with VR as well. The same thing may be true for crypto, or may be true for blockchain. That it may be that right now there's a lot of excitement and a lot of money, but when that excitement winnows down and kind of crunches, there might not be a lot left. It might be that, like, okay, people were really excited and things got really crazy for a while, but then it went back to nothing because there wasn't really anything long-term in there. So the reality is that looking for any hot technology is going to be a risk. It's not a slam dunk, like this is definitely going to be around. Like learning, like Postgres, database management or database administration, that's a solid bet. It's not very sexy, but it's definitely going to be a job 10 years from now. Blockchain is not that. But anytime that you're thinking about learning a new and emergent technology, the thing you want to think for yourself is, where is this going to, you don't need to worry about where is this right now. Where it is right now doesn't really matter. The question is, where is this going to be 5 years from now? 5 years from now, what is going to be more and less important, right? And I guess that I would argue, if you're looking at the things that people are working on, probably what's going to be much less important 5 years from now is, for example, knowing C. C is like a very, very low-level language. And I think 5 years from now, people will very, very rarely be writing C. Mostly people will be writing much safer languages, and they'll be dealing with much higher levels of abstraction. More and more code will be written at high levels rather than low levels. And so I probably wouldn't try to learn C right now if I were coming up as a programmer. Then on the other side of that, what is right now very small that is eventually going to get big? Well, you could say that, like, for example, distributed database administration, like learning how to administrate, Spanner or CockroachDB or something like this. These are very small technologies right now, but they're going to become very big 5 years from now. And so I think, in my opinion, blockchain is one of these things where it's somewhat of a moving target. Blockchain is going to go up and down, absolutely. Like I've already seen plenty of boom bust in the last couple of years, but if you scale it out 5 years from now, I think blockchain is going to matter quite a bit, and a lot of things are going to move on to blockchains 5 years from now. And that is fundamentally what really intrigues me, and what the way that I have kind of put to the test of whether blockchain is the right decision from a technological and career perspective. And I personally think that it is, and it's also something that I'm passionate about. And if you're passionate about that, that just trumps a lot of other stuff, So even if it's like, well, I don't know if VR is going to go anywhere, but I love VR. I'm passionate, like I care so much about it, and I want to see it succeed. Then screw it, go chase that rainbow, because you're going to be much more effective if it's something that you really, really care about.
Sorry, I'm just like trying to think of what we just said. That's very, very because to me, like I'm not just interviewing you, because I'm also like picking your mind on that thing. I think that's very incredible. Yeah, so that's pretty much out of the question wrap up to from my my notes, and
Cool.
and I just want to add to one last thing before we end this conversation. I'm very curious on your day-to-day routine, because this could be extended to both of your job searching kind of phase and versus like your phase now. What do you do for fun? Like, I know you're a very intense person. You love to, to study a lot, the algorithm a lot, and then you like to network with people a lot. Like, what do you do for fun, and what kind of to keep you this lifestyle? Like, what do you enjoy most of the time?
Yeah, what do I do for fun? Well, that's a good question. So I sometimes I exercise. I think is a really great stress reliever for me. So I work out. I do CrossFit. I do kickboxing. Those two things in tandem, I think, really I personally enjoy it. I think like kind of bring a lot of kind of focus and solidity into my life. What else I do for fun? I sometimes program for fun. Like there are little projects that I like to do on the side. Sometimes I'll I don't know, watch dumb YouTube videos. I'll trawl for stuff on the internet. I'll read articles that are of no particular use to my career. Yeah, a lot of reading. I'll sometimes watch films. I'll hang out with friends. I'll go on hikes. What else? I don't know. Very, very occasionally, I'll play video games. Although it's been very rare in the last couple of years.
Airbnb had a room for playing video games, right? I remembered. Because last time when I went to Airbnb, you and what's his name?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and you were talking
Namdi,
about Namdi. I never say his name right. But yeah, and so like when you just said doing like program for fun, I recently see your blog has a new interface. It wasn't like that before. Like it looks like a lot more modern these days. Because before I really like your content. But I think the website itself now looks better. than
My old blog was a piece of crap. I mean, it was like a WordPress theme from I think it was like 2012 or 2013 or something, and I never changed it because I didn't really care. But yeah, I think now that I'm like actually a professional software engineer, it's probably time that I spruce things up, and get things cleaner.
Okay. Well, thank you for making the time. This is
of course.
A lot of advice are very important, like for my coming audience, because a lot of them recently just graduated. And I think this video is so important for them to watch now, so they can, maybe avoid some of the mistakes or learn a lot of insights into their job finding. And I think, I don't do this for any profit. I want to also deliver this so people can learn from you, from a lot of people. So yeah, thank you for making the time. This means a lot to me and a lot to these students. And maybe like if people want you back, I'll see if they can reach out to you again. Because there's a lot more I want to cover with you. You just without not in this time frame. So thank you, and we're just gonna call you a day.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun, man.
All right, cool, man. All right, I'll see you next time. Bye bye.
All right, bye.